Dust floated in slow circles inside the auction hall, caught in the pale light of 100 alien lanterns. Daniel Reyes had not come there to buy anything. He had come there to hide. 3 collectors were somewhere in the trade station looking for him, and the auction hall was the only place with a strict no-violence rule enforced by armed drones. So Daniel slipped through the crowd of aliens, keeping his head down, pretending to be interested in whatever was being sold that day. His boots were falling apart. His jacket smelled of engine oil and old coffee. He had exactly 42 credits to his name, and none of them were enough to fix his real problem. The auctioneer, a tall insect-like creature named Orvin, stood on a raised platform, his 4 thin arms moving as he pointed to holographic images of planets, asteroids, and moons. Rich buyers from a dozen species sat in the front rows, bidding on mining rights and rare resources. Daniel stood near the back, arms crossed, trying to look like he belonged. "Next item," Orvin announced, his voice buzzing through a translator box. "A moon. Designation, empty. No minerals. No atmosphere worth mining. No strategic value. Survey teams marked it a waste of fuel to even land on. Starting bid, 100 credits." Nobody moved. Nobody even looked up. Orvin scanned the room, clearly annoyed. "Come now. Someone must want a rock to call their own." Daniel almost laughed. A rock. A moon nobody wanted, being sold for less than the price of a decent meal. He thought about the collectors waiting for him outside, about his empty bank account, about how his life had become one long string of bad decisions. Buying a worthless moon would be the worst decision yet. It would also be the only thing that was truly his. 42 credits, Daniel said, raising his hand before he could stop himself. The room turned to look at him. A human, standing in the back, offering his last coins for a moon that even the auctioneer admitted was garbage. "Sold," Orvin said, to the sentimental human. "Congratulations. You now own nothing of value, official and legal." A few aliens chuckled. Daniel didn't care. He walked to the counter to finish the paperwork, ignoring the stares. A young Varaxi clerk with green-scaled skin processed the transaction quickly, clearly wanting him gone. She slid a small data chip across the counter along with the ownership papers. "Comes with the sale," she said. "Old survey records. Corrupted mostly. Nobody bothered to clean them before listing the moon." Daniel picked it up and turned it over in his fingers. It was scratched and old, the kind of tech that had been out of production for decades. "Why keep it if it's junk?" "Rules," the clerk said. "Everything sold with its original files, corrupted or not. Not my problem anymore." She waved him along, already looking past him at the next customer. Daniel walked out of the auction hall into the crowded station corridor, papers in one hand and the strange little chip in the other. He should have felt like a fool. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity. He found a bench near a noodle stand and sat down, ignoring the smell of alien spices drifting from the counter. He pulled out his old data pad, connected it to the chip, and waited. Most of the files loaded as static, broken images, and corrupted numbers that meant nothing. He was about to give up when one line of text appeared clearly on the screen, standing out against the noise. "Survey terminated. Recommend permanent no-value designation. Authorization, Reyes." Daniel froze. Reyes was his last name. It was common enough among humans, sure. Thousands of people shared it. But seeing it attached to a survey report about his newly bought moon sent a strange chill down his back. He scrolled further, but the rest of the file dissolved into broken code, nothing readable left. He sat there for a long moment, noodle steam curling past his face, station announcements echoing overhead in 5 different languages. Around him, the galaxy moved on, uncaring about one broke human and his worthless purchase. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something about this moon had been buried on purpose, and buried carefully. He thought about the collectors still hunting him through the station. He thought about his empty accounts, his failing shuttle, his life that felt like it was slipping through his fingers no matter how hard he worked. And then he thought about the moon, sitting out there in the dark, marked empty by someone who might have shared his own name. He made his decision quickly, the way he made most decisions in his life, without enough thought, and without a backup plan. He would go see it himself. Not because he expected to find anything valuable. He had no illusions about getting rich off a pile of gray dust. He just wanted to know why someone had gone through the trouble of making sure nobody else would ever want it. Daniel gathered his papers, tucked the data chip safely into his jacket pocket, and headed toward the docking bay where his old shuttle waited. Behind him, the auction house lights dimmed as the day's sales came to an end. Ahead of him, past the station's metal walls and out into open space, an empty moon was waiting, keeping a secret that had outlived whoever had tried to hide it. He didn't know yet how much that secret would change everything. But as he walked through the station toward his ship, something in his gut told him his life was never going to be the same again. The shuttle groaned like an old man getting out of bed as Daniel pushed it past its comfortable speed. Warning lights blinked on the dashboard, the same 3 lights that had been blinking for the past 2 years because he never had enough money to fix them properly. He tapped the dashboard out of habit, and the lights blinked off, at least for now. 3 days of travel brought him to the edge of a quiet system, far from any major trade routes. No wonder nobody wanted this moon. It orbited a dead gray planet with no rings, no interesting neighbors, nothing that would draw tourists or miners. Just empty space and silence. As Daniel guided the shuttle closer, his instruments began acting strangely. The navigation screen flickered. The scanner, usually reliable even in its old age, started giving readings that made no sense, distances changing every few seconds as if the moon itself was moving, though it clearly was not. "That's new," Daniel muttered, tapping the scanner console. He had flown through asteroid fields with wonky readings before, but this felt different. This felt deliberate. He checked the old survey files again on his datapad. Buried among the corrupted text, he found a fragment that mentioned interference field, source unknown, recommend avoidance. That explained why previous surveys had given up so easily. Something on or near the moon was messing with their equipment, and instead of investigating further, whoever ran the survey had simply marked it worthless and moved on. Daniel eased the shuttle into a slow, careful orbit before beginning his descent. The moon's surface came into view through the front window, a rolling landscape of gray dust and shallow craters, lit by the distant light of a sun that felt too far away to matter. It looked, at first glance, exactly like every other dead moon he had ever seen. Boring, lifeless, not worth the fuel it took to get there. He landed the shuttle in a wide, flat crater, the landing gear kicking up clouds of fine dust that settled slowly in the low gravity. After running through his checklist, Daniel suited up, checked his oxygen levels twice out of nervous habit, and stepped outside. The silence hit him first. No wind, no sound of any kind except his own breathing inside the suit helmet and the soft crunch of dust beneath his boots. He walked a short distance from the shuttle, scanning the ground with a handheld device, expecting nothing but rock and dust. That was when he noticed the lines. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, shadows cast strangely across the crater floor. But as he moved closer, the lines became clearer, straight edges cutting across the natural curve of the dust, forming shapes too precise to be an accident of nature. Squares, circles, a pattern that repeated every few meters, like something drawn with tools, not left by wind or rock. Daniel knelt down and brushed away a layer of dust with his gloved hand. Beneath the top layer was something smooth and dark, almost like metal, though duller and harder to identify. His heart started beating faster. This was not a natural moon. Someone had built something here, and then covered it, hidden it beneath generations of dust so carefully that it fooled every scanner that came looking. He hurried back to the shuttle, mind racing, and pulled out the old data chip from his jacket pocket. He connected it to the shuttle's main console this time instead of his small data pad, hoping the larger system might pull more information from the corrupted files. The screen flickered, then stabilized just enough to show a broken video feed. Daniel leaned forward, watching static clear for a few seconds at a time. He caught a glimpse of a military insignia, one he didn't recognize, old and worn, the kind of design that belonged to an earlier, rougher era of human spaceflight. Numbers scrolled beside it, a countdown of some kind, though the ending was lost to corruption before he could read what it counted down to. Then the screen went dark completely, the chip finally giving up whatever little life it had left. Daniel sat back in his pilot's seat, staring at the blank console, his own reflection faint in the dark screen. Empty moon. No value. Nothing worth mining. That was what the auction house had told him, what the survey records had claimed, what every scanner in the galaxy apparently agreed on. And yet here he was, sitting on top of buried structures and old military insignias that suggested humans had been here long before anyone thought to check. He looked out the window at the gray landscape stretching toward the horizon, unremarkable and quiet under the distant sun. Somewhere beneath that dust, something had been hidden on purpose, hidden well enough to survive scans, surveys, and decades of neglect. Daniel didn't have the tools or the knowledge to dig deeper on his own, not safely anyway. He needed someone who understood old human tech, someone who might recognize that insignia and make sense of the countdown he had glimpsed on the screen. There was only one person he trusted enough to call, an old friend of his late father who had spent his whole life around forgotten machines and buried history. He reached for the comm system, hands steadier now than they had been in years, and began composing a message. Whatever secret this moon was hiding, he was not going to uncover it alone. Commander Halvorsen answered the call on the second ring, which surprised Daniel, since the old man usually took his time doing everything. His face appeared on the screen, weathered and lined, gray hair cut short in the same military style he had worn for as long as Daniel had known him. Reyes, Halvorsen said, using Daniel's last name the way he always did, as if still speaking to a soldier under his command. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't, Daniel admitted. I need your help with something. It's about a moon I bought. Halvorsen raised an eyebrow. You bought a moon. It's a long story. Can you meet me? I'll send coordinates. I think this involves old human military tech, the kind from before the expansion. That got the old man's attention. His posture straightened, years of habit kicking in at the mention of pre-expansion technology. Send me everything you have. I'm on my way. 2 days later, Halvorsen's battered transport landed beside Daniel's shuttle in the same crater, kicking up its own cloud of gray dust. The old commander stepped out slowly, his joints stiff from age, but his eyes sharp as he scanned the surrounding landscape with the same careful attention he had once used to scan battlefields. Show me, he said simply. Daniel led him to the spot where he had found the strange patterns beneath the dust. Halvorsen knelt down with some difficulty, running his fingers over the exposed dark metal, tracing the straight lines and geometric shapes with obvious recognition in his expression. This construction style, Halvorsen murmured. I haven't seen this in decades. This is old, really old, from before humanity officially made contact with the wider galaxy. Before contact, Daniel repeated. That doesn't make sense. How could there be human structures out here from before we even knew other species existed? Halvorsen stood, brushing dust from his knees, his face grim. There are things about our early history that never made it into the public records, Reyes. Programs, expeditions, things done quietly, before we understood how dangerous the galaxy could be for a young species like ours. Daniel pulled out the data chip and handed it over. This came with the sale. It's mostly corrupted, but there's a video fragment with a military insignia and some kind of countdown. Halvorsen studied the chip carefully before nodding. Let's get back to your shuttle. I have equipment that might read more from this than your old console could. Back inside, Halvorsen connected a small device to the chip, muttering commands under his breath as lines of code scrolled across his screen. After several tense minutes, a portion of the file stabilized, revealing more of the video than Daniel had managed to see before. The insignia became clearer, an eagle wrapped around a shield, an old design Halvorsen recognized instantly. Early Colonial Defense Force, he said quietly. Disbanded generations ago. Most records were sealed or destroyed after the program ended. The countdown numbers also became readable this time, though what they were counting down to remained unclear. Beneath the numbers, a single line of corrupted text flickered into view, vault sealed, awaiting authorized retrieval. A vault, Daniel said slowly. So there really is something buried here. Halvorsen looked at him, his expression unreadable. It seems that way. And if this is what I think it is, we need to find the entrance, carefully, and without drawing attention. They spent the next several hours walking the crater with specialized scanning equipment Halvorsen had brought, the kind built specifically to detect pre-expansion human tech, immune to the same interference that had confused Daniel's older instruments. Slowly, a shape began to emerge beneath the surface, a large structure buried not far from where the shuttles had landed. Near the center of the pattern, they found it. A section of ground that responded differently to the scanner, a slight variation suggesting something mechanical hidden just beneath the dust. Daniel and Halvorsen cleared the area by hand, careful not to damage whatever lay below. Beneath the dust, they uncovered a metal panel sealed shut, with a small control interface built into its surface. Halvorsen examined it closely, comparing it against old technical diagrams stored on his personal device. "This requires authorization," he said. "Biometric, most likely voice and genetic markers both. Whoever built this wanted to make absolutely certain only the right people could open it." Daniel thought about the survey file, the single word that had stopped him cold back on the trade station. "Try my name," he said. "Reyes." The old survey records mentioned that name as the one who authorized sealing this place. Halvorsen looked at him for a long moment before nodding slowly. He input Daniel's full name into the panel, then stepped back as a mechanical voice, old and slightly distorted, spoke from a hidden speaker. "Voice confirmation required." Daniel stepped forward, feeling strange saying his own name out loud to a machine buried beneath an alien moon. "Daniel Reyes." For a long, silent moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep groan of old machinery finally waking after decades of sleep, the panel slid open, revealing a dark passage leading down into the moon itself. Cold air, stale but breathable, drifted up from the darkness below. Halvorsen exchanged a glance with Daniel, both of them understanding the weight of what they were about to do. Whatever waited down there had been sealed away for a reason, hidden from an entire galaxy for generations. Daniel switched on his flashlight, took a steadying breath, and stepped forward into the passage. Behind him, Halvorsen followed close, his old military training taking over as he moved with careful, measured steps. The passage sloped downward, walls smooth and untouched despite their age. As they descended deeper into the moon, faint lights began flickering to life along the walls, responding to their presence, guiding them toward whatever lay waiting in the darkness ahead. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say yet, only the growing certainty that they were about to discover something the galaxy was never supposed to find. The passage opened into a massive chamber, larger than Daniel had expected, its ceiling lost somewhere above the reach of their flashlights. Rows of dormant machines lined the walls, covered in a thin layer of dust that had somehow found its way even this deep underground. In the center of the chamber stood a tall, cylindrical structure, dark and silent, humming faintly with the barest trace of power. "Careful," Halvorsen said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "This place has been sealed a long time. No telling what still works and what doesn't." They moved slowly across the chamber floor, flashlights sweeping over ancient equipment, control panels, and what looked like storage containers stacked along the far wall. Daniel's boots left clear prints in the undisturbed dust, the first footprints this room had seen in longer than he could imagine. As they approached the cylindrical structure, its faint hum grew stronger. Lights along its surface began flickering, weak at first, then steadier, climbing from top to bottom like something slowly waking from a long sleep. Daniel stepped back instinctively, hand moving toward the sidearm he kept holstered out of habit, though he doubted it would do much good against whatever this was. "It's activating," Halvorsen said, watching closely, his tone more curious than afraid. "Power source still active after all this time. Impressive engineering." A soft mechanical voice filled the chamber, calm and measured, speaking in old-style standard English that sounded formal compared to how people spoke now. "Unauthorized access detected. Please identify yourselves." Daniel exchanged a glance with Halvorsen before answering. "Daniel Reyes. I own this moon, legally purchased at auction." A pause followed, longer than felt natural for a machine. Voice pattern matches authorized bloodline. Confirming identity through genetic archive. Lights along the cylindrical structure shifted color, moving from a cautious yellow to a calmer blue. A section of the structure's surface slid open, revealing a simple interface panel and a small speaker grill. "Identity confirmed," the voice continued. "Designation, custodian. I have been guarding this location since its sealing, awaiting proper authorization to release stored information and assets." Daniel stepped closer, still cautious. "Custodian. What exactly are you guarding?" This facility was established by early human deep space explorers before formal contact with other galactic species, the custodian explained. During that period, certain discoveries and technologies were deemed too dangerous or too valuable to reveal prematurely. This moon was selected as a concealment site. Halvorsen stepped forward, arms crossed, studying the machine with the focus of someone finally getting answers to questions he had wondered about for years. Concealment from who? Other species, or from our own governments? Both, the custodian answered simply. The individuals responsible for this facility believed early humanity was vulnerable, technologically inferior to the majority of galactic civilizations at that time. They feared that revealing certain discoveries too early would result in exploitation, conflict, or worse. This vault was created as insurance, a safeguard for future generations, should humanity ever require what lies within. Daniel thought about the corrupted survey file, about how carefully this place had been hidden from every scan and survey since. And the false survey data? The reason nobody else ever found this. Correct, the custodian confirmed. Falsified reports were seeded into official galactic databases, marking this moon as devoid of value. This ensured minimal interest from external parties. The interference field surrounding the moon further discourages thorough investigation. Halvorsen let out a low whistle, shaking his head slowly. Clever. Frustratingly clever. Daniel looked around the massive chamber again, seeing it now not just as buried ruins, but as something deliberately preserved, something someone had sacrificed greatly to protect. What exactly is stored here? Historical records predating official galactic contact, the custodian said. Technological schematics considered advanced for their era, though possibly outdated by current standards. Defensive systems designed for humanity's protection, and access to a secondary vault, sealed separately, requiring additional authorization beyond simple bloodline confirmation. Before Daniel could ask more, a soft chime sounded from Halvorsen's personal device, an alert notification he quickly checked, his expression shifting to concern. "We've got a problem," he said. "My equipment is picking up an incoming ship. Small, fast, Varaxi design based on the signature." Custodian, Daniel said quickly. "Can you hide the entrance? Mask whatever energy signature might be leaking out." "Partial concealment is possible," the custodian replied. "However, prolonged investigation by determined parties may eventually detect anomalies. Recommend limiting external activity until threat has passed." Daniel turned to Halvorsen, his mind racing. "We need to get back up top and figure out how to deal with whoever's coming, before they find this entrance themselves." Halvorsen nodded, already moving toward the passage they had come through. "Agreed. Custodian, seal this chamber until Reyes authorizes re-entry." "Understood," the machine replied. Sealing initiated. As they hurried back up the passage, the chamber behind them grew dark once more, lights dimming, the ancient structure settling back into its long, patient sleep. Daniel's mind buzzed with everything he had just learned, the weight of a secret far larger than anything he had imagined when he bought a worthless moon on a desperate whim. Now, with a Varaxi inspection ship approaching, he had far less time than he wanted to figure out how to protect it. By the time Daniel and Halvorsen reached the surface, the Varaxi ship was already visible against the dark sky, descending slowly toward the crater with the confident precision of someone who had done this many times before. Daniel's heart pounded as he brushed dust from his suit, trying to look calm despite the panic building in his chest. "Let me handle the talking," Halvorsen said quietly. "I've dealt with inspectors before. Stay calm, answer only what's asked, nothing more." The Varaxi ship landed a short distance away, its landing struts sinking slightly into the loose dust. A ramp lowered, and a tall reptilian figure stepped out, followed by two smaller inspection drones hovering at her sides. Her scales were a deep green, her eyes sharp and calculating as she surveyed the crater, taking note of both shuttles parked nearby. "I am Inspector Sella, Galactic Trade Compliance Division," she announced, her translator device giving her voice a slightly mechanical edge. This site registered unusual energy fluctuations inconsistent with an officially designated empty moon. "I am here to investigate." Daniel stepped forward before Halvorsen could stop him, forcing a friendly smile onto his face. "Inspector, This is my property, purchased legally at auction. I wasn't aware there were any restrictions on visiting my own moon. Sella's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him with obvious suspicion. There are no restrictions on visiting private property. There are, however, strict regulations regarding undeclared technology and unauthorized excavation. Your energy signature suggests significant power usage inconsistent with simple sightseeing. Halvorsen stepped in smoothly, his years of experience showing in his relaxed posture. We're conducting a personal survey, Inspector. Nothing official, just curiosity about what my friend purchased. Some old equipment we brought along may have caused unusual readings. Sella's inspection drones drifted past them, scanning the crater floor with soft beeping sounds. Daniel tried not to react as one drone passed directly over the concealed entrance, hovering for a moment longer than felt comfortable before moving on. The custodian's concealment efforts seemed to be holding, but Daniel could feel sweat forming on his forehead despite the suit's climate control. Curiosity, Sella repeated, clearly unconvinced. Your moon was marked no value in official records. Yet you traveled a significant distance, brought specialized equipment, and generated energy signatures typically associated with excavation activity. This does not match simple curiosity, human. Daniel forced himself to shrug casually, though his mind raced for an answer that would satisfy her without revealing too much. Look, Inspector, I'll be honest. I found some old wreckage buried under the dust. Human wreckage, from way before we made contact with other species. Historical stuff, nothing dangerous. I got excited and brought my friend here to help me look at it. Sella tilted her head, considering this. Historical wreckage. And this required this level of energy expenditure. Old scanning equipment isn't exactly efficient, Halvorsen added quickly. Some of it hasn't been used in years. Draws more power than it should. The inspection drones continued their sweep, gradually moving away from the concealed entrance toward other sections of the crater. Daniel allowed himself a small breath of relief. Though Sella's expression remained skeptical, her eyes moving between the two humans as if trying to decide whether they were lying. I will require documentation, she said finally. Records of whatever wreckage you claim to have found, submitted to the Trade Compliance Office within the standard reporting period. Failure to comply will result in further investigation. Of course, Daniel said quickly. We'll get that sorted right away. Sella studied him a moment longer, clearly not entirely satisfied, but apparently lacking enough evidence to push further at that moment. Very well. This site remains flagged for monitoring. Any further unusual activity will result in immediate follow-up inspection without prior notice. She turned, gesturing for her drones to return, and made her way back toward her ship. At the base of the ramp, she paused, looking back at Daniel with an expression that made his stomach tighten. Humans rarely show this much excitement over old wreckage, Mr. Reyes. I hope, for your sake, that is truly all this is. Daniel held her gaze, keeping his expression as neutral as possible. It is, Inspector. Just an old family curiosity, nothing more. Sella nodded slowly, though her eyes lingered a moment longer before she finally boarded her ship. Daniel let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his legs feeling weak with relief. Halvorsen placed a steady hand on his shoulder, his expression grim despite the successful deflection. That bought us time, Halvorsen said, not safety. She'll be watching this system closely now. We need to figure out what we're dealing with, and quickly, before she finds a reason to come back with a full inspection team. They made their way back toward the concealed entrance, waiting until Sella's ship was well out of scanning range before signaling the custodian to reopen the passage. As they descended once more into the chamber below, the ancient machine's lights flickered back to life, welcoming them back into the depths of the moon's hidden secret. Authorization confirmed, the custodian said as they entered. I detected the inspection attempt. Concealment protocols functioned within expected parameters, though continued external monitoring increases future risk. Daniel nodded, still catching his breath from the tense encounter. Custodian, you mentioned a secondary vault earlier, something requiring additional authorization. What exactly is down there? The machine's lights pulsed thoughtfully, almost as if considering how to answer. Records available to me are incomplete regarding the secondary vault's full contents. However, Preliminary data suggests significance far beyond what is stored in this chamber. I recommend caution before proceeding further. Daniel exchanged a look with Halvorsen, both of them understanding that whatever waited deeper within the moon was likely to change everything they thought they understood about humanity's quiet, hidden history among the stars. Deeper into the moon, past the chamber where the custodian had first awakened, a second passage waited, sealed behind a heavier door than the first. Daniel stood before it, flashlight in hand, feeling the weight of everything that had led him here, from a desperate auction bid to standing at the edge of whatever secret his own family name had helped hide generations ago. "Custodian," he said, "open it." The machine's voice echoed softly through the passage behind them. "Warning. Contents of this vault were sealed under highest authorization. Once opened, information cannot be resealed or forgotten. Please confirm intent to proceed." Daniel glanced at Halvorsen, who gave a small, steady nod, his expression showing none of the hesitation Daniel felt in his own chest. "I understand," Daniel said. "Open it." With a deep mechanical groan, the heavy door slid open, revealing a chamber even larger than the one above. Rows of massive shapes stood covered in protective coverings, tall enough to brush the distant ceiling, silent and still after generations of sleep. As Daniel stepped further inside, the coverings began retracting automatically, responding to some hidden signal, revealing what lay beneath. Ships, dozens of them, sleek and strange, built with a design unlike anything currently used by human forces or any other species Daniel had ever seen. Beside them stood tall cylindrical structures humming with quiet energy, their purpose unclear at first glance, though Halvorsen's sharp intake of breath suggested he recognized something Daniel did not. "Terraforming units," Halvorsen said quietly, his voice filled with something between awe and disbelief. "Old designs, but functional ones. This is colony fleet technology." The custodian's voice filled the chamber, calm as always despite the enormity of what it revealed. "Correct. This facility contains a dormant colonization fleet, prepared during humanity's earliest deep space expeditions, long before official contact with other galactic civilizations. This fleet was intended as humanity's true first expansion beyond its home system." Daniel stared at the ships, his mind struggling to process what this meant. Wait, before contact? That means humans were already out here, already capable of this, long before the galaxy ever officially met us. "Affirmative," the custodian confirmed. "Historical records presented to the wider galaxy suggest humanity achieved interstellar travel only shortly before formal contact. This is inaccurate. Humanity possessed capability for large-scale colonization significantly earlier. This information was deliberately withheld." Halvorsen ran a hand along one of the ship's smooth hulls, his expression distant, thoughtful. "Why hide something like this? Why keep humanity looking weaker than we actually were?" "Survival," the custodian answered simply. Early observations of galactic politics revealed significant danger for young, technologically advancing species. Species perceived as too capable, too quickly, often faced hostility, exploitation, or preemptive conflict from more established powers. Those responsible for this facility believed humanity's best chance for peaceful integration required appearing less advanced than we truly were. Daniel let this sink in slowly, walking between the rows of dormant ships, each one representing a piece of history the galaxy had never been allowed to see. Humanity, hiding its own strength, playing weaker than it was, all to survive long enough to find its place among the stars without drawing unwanted attention. "So this whole time," Daniel said slowly, "everyone out there, every species that looks down on humans as some young, fragile species, they don't even know the truth." "Correct," the custodian confirmed. "This facility, and others like it scattered across various systems, represent humanity's true history. A history of quiet resilience, careful patience, and deliberate restraint." Halvorsen turned to Daniel, his expression serious. "This changes everything, Reyes. If this gets out, if the wrong people find out what's really buried out here, it could bring exactly the kind of attention your family tried so hard to avoid generations ago." Daniel nodded slowly, understanding settling over him with quiet weight. He thought about Inspector Sella, about her suspicious eyes and her promise to keep watching this system. He thought about the collectors still hunting him back at the trade station, unaware that the man they were chasing now controlled something far larger than any debt he owed. Then we protect it, Daniel said firmly. Not hide it forever, but protect it until we understand it well enough to decide what happens next. The custodian's lights pulsed in what almost seemed like approval. A reasonable approach. I will continue guarding this facility as instructed. Authorization protocols will remain tied to your bloodline, Daniel Reyes, as originally intended by this vault's founders. Daniel looked around the chamber one final time, at the ships that proved humanity's history was far richer and stranger than anyone outside their species had ever known. A worthless moon, bought on a desperate whim with his last few credits, had turned out to hold humanity's greatest hidden legacy. He thought about Halvorson's warning, about Sella's suspicion, about the careful, dangerous path ahead of him now. He would need trusted allies, careful planning, and more patience than he had ever shown in his life. But standing there, surrounded by proof of humanity's quiet strength, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt like his life finally had purpose. Later that night, back on the surface, Daniel stood outside his shuttle, looking up at the stars scattered across the dark sky above the crater. Somewhere out there, rumors were already beginning to spread through trade routes. Whispers about a broke human who had somehow struck fortune on a supposedly worthless moon. Whispers that would eventually draw attention he wasn't ready for. But for now, standing quietly under an alien sky, guardian of a secret older than galactic contact itself, Daniel allowed himself a small, tired smile. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it, one careful step at a time.